Good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are. We are back in Volgograd or Stalingrad. It's a lovely day today, and we have, as we did for our first two shows, Paul Errington is doing us the overview from England, and we've got Mikhail there out on the ground on a gorgeous sunny day. So thank you for doing this, guys. Mikhail, it's minus 10 there today, which is a little bit chilly, but
yeah,
just a bit.
At least you got the sun. So so here we are. We're further north than we were last time, folks. I'll just bring up a map and explain where we are, because we've got a little bit further up. So last time we were down near this area here, and now we're what, 5 kilometers north, 6 kilometers north.
Yeah, something like this. Yeah,
and we're in the area here near the factory, and near the banks of the Volga. So brilliant. So we're going to get on, and I don't really know where we're going to go because I've not been to these locations. So I'm just going to follow the lead of Paul and Mikhail. So brilliant. Let's get started. So good. Paul, let's give us an introduction.
Good morning, everyone from Chile, Stalingrad. So to all history buffs.
Good. So, Paul, give us a bit of introduction for the show.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. What I want to do is just, for those who saw the last show, is just give a little overview, a little bit of a briefing on where we've moved to now. And Paul put the map up, and what we've done is we've moved north along the banks of the Volga into the area of the famous factory district. Huge industrial area, the tractor factory in the north, the Barrikady factory in the middle, and the Red October factory on the southern edge of the industrial district. But having said that, runs down to the area around the Mamayev Kurgan, around what the area the Germans knew as the tennis racket, where the railway lines formed the sort of head of a tennis racket. And there were chemical works and other factories around that area. So a huge area. So just a little bit of an overview as to why the Germans switched their assault into this area. Last time we spoke about the push by elements of Seydlitz Kurzbach's 51st Corps into the city centre. That fighting began to slow down because basically the German units were worn out around about the 20th. So the Germans were trying to move more troops in, and the fighting was still going on, but there wasn't any significant progress after the 13th Guards Rifle Division had come ashore to defend the city centre. Okay, so what the Germans decided to do, a very famous photograph, this is actually on the northern outskirts of the Barrikady factory, on the 16th of October, elements of the 305 Infantry Division just about to go into the assault. Okay, so the Germans decided to switch their Schwerpunkt, which is basically their point of maximum effort, northwards into the factory district. Take the factory district and then try and roll up the rest of the Volga banks from the north. So they began the process of transferring more units. A good photo there of the Barrikady itself, which I'm sure we'll see later on. They began the process of transferring units further north and bringing in units from other areas of the front, because, as I said, the German divisions that carried out the initial assault were all worn out. So they moved up the 24th Panzer Division. Going back to that Vinitsa conference on the 12th of September, one of the pluses that came out of it for Paulus was Hitler authorised the elements of the 48th Panzer Corps of General Hermann Huth's 4th Panzer Army to actually be reallocated to 6th Army. So he utilised those units, particularly 24th Panzer and the 94th Infantry Division, by moving them up from the south of Stalingrad, south of Tsaritsa, a gully that where they've taken the south of Stalingrad around the grain elevator and the number 2 station, and moved them into the area to the west of the city centre and then further north. And they began fighting to clear all the workers' settlements to the west of the factories. Now, that fighting went on for a number of days, very heavy fighting. to clear the Russian defenders from the actual workers' settlement. So that set up the actual assault into the city, because the Germans now controlled the areas to the west of the factories. The other thing they had to do was they had to reduce the Orlovka salient, which is a salient that ran basically northwest from the factory area out towards what the Germans called the Nordriegelstellung, their northern blocking positions, where the elements of 16 Panzer and the 3rd and the 60th motorized divisions were actually fighting off Russian attacks from the north. So that salient had to be reduced. So again, there was a delay on the attack in the factory district. That salient was reduced in early October, and preparations were made to begin the assault into the factories. Now, at this time, Shuvarikov, commander of the 62nd Army, was, of course, good layout map of the actual Barrikady itself. He was bringing in reinforcements because he realized that the Germans were going to attack the industrial settlements, the industrial areas. So he brought over rifle divisions from the eastern bank and allocated a fresh rifle division into the defense of all three factories. The 37th Guards Rifle went into the tractor factory, the 308th Rifle Division went into the Barrikady, and the 37th Guards Rifle Division into the Red October. So the Russians reinforced, ready for this assault. It began on the morning of the 14th, where what's known as Grupa Yarnica. This was a large-scale battle group based on the named after the commander of the 389th Infantry Division, General Yarnica. And also made up of the 350th Infantry Division and elements of the 14th Panzer, supported by the same two Sturmgeschütz Brigade, the 244 and 245, who initially supported the divisions that had assaulted into the city centre. Okay, so massive bombardment, massive use of air power, because at that stage the Stukas in particular could be used tactically to bomb individual buildings. So there's a massive airstrike going on into the tractor factory, and they actually attacked the tractor factory first. Now, because we're concentrating on the Barrikady,
just to interrupt you for a second, because Mikhail, your image has gone rotated again.
Oh, right, yeah.
Your image needs to be. We've got the tank turret, but we can see it sideways, so it's connection issues and stuff. This is the perils of live TV, folks, but we'll get it sorted out.
I don't know why it is happening. Step.
Oh.
How is it now? Yeah, it's now better.
We're back.
Yeah, that's better, Mikhail. Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah,
just to look like we're back on again. So just to continue briefly. So the assault into the tractor factory by elements of the 389, 305 and 14th Panzer was successful. The massive bombardment, massive airstrikes pushed the 39th Guards back through the factory. I'm keeping it relatively short. It was very, very heavy fighting in the workshops, but the Germans suffered heavy casualties, but they managed to force their way to the Volga bank. And by the early hours of the 15th, the actual most of the factory had been cleared. So what that meant was Yarnica then swung his battle group, his Kampfgruppe of 3 divisions, facing southwards. So they were going to advance south from the tractor factory into the northern side of the Barrikady. That again began on the 16th of October, with 389 Division covering the northern flank, 305 Division, Infantry Division, together with elements of 14th Panzer. Yeah, that's great, Paul. Yeah, so you can see they're going to attack from the tractor factory, basically down the Volga bank into the northern sector of the actual Barrikady. Again, this is there's a large-scale bombardment goes on by the German artillery out in the steppe to the west around Borodisha and places like that you can see on the map. And also, again, because the Germans haven't moved into the factory, air power could be used, giving full value to the actual German assault, where again, particularly the Stukas could pick out targets and deliver the bombs almost directly onto the targets without compromising the actual assault itself. That changed, of course, once they became embroiled in factory fighting. And air power wasn't as valuable because they were concerned about them knocking out their own troops. Okay, so the assault began into the Barrikady. So I think what we'll do is we're actually in the area of the Barrikady now. So I'll let Mikhail talk a little bit about where we are, what we can see, and then we'll continue with some dialogue about the actual fighting in the Barrikady as we go through.
Yeah. So Mikhail, tell us what we looked at the monument first. So that monument you showed us on overlooking the Volga, that was to factory workers who were killed. Yes.
Yes, I've shown you a few memorials, including the tank turret, which was pointing to German positions, which is that way from us. Yeah, we can see these monuments on that picture. So we can see the chimneys directly where the memorial, which was on the bank of the Volga River, is a memorial to the signalman of 138 Rifle Division who defended this piece of land. So we have to understand that Islands of Fire is a symbolical islands. It is not the real one. So the Russian 138 Soviet division of Colonel Lyudnikov was surrounded by from three sides and pushed to the Volga River. So now we are on the place where we can see remains of so-called Commissar House or U-shaped building, and we can still, we can see here some damages from the war. So on one of the picture you will see now on the screen, you can see how that building looked like in the beginning of the century, which was built by the British specialists who built here the famous Wickes to Barrikady Gun factory. So here we can see
here on the map now. So Mikhail's moving from the banks of Volga, so going through this area here, and we're about here where it's number 10 on the photo here, the famous U-shaped building. Obviously, folks, for those watching, there are lots of changes in the years since the war, but we're seeing what we can, and amazing stuff.
Should I go back?
No, it's good. Just keep on going. So we're looking at that's the building there, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. You can see there are a few good pictures I sent you earlier where you can see semi-round like castles. So now we are right on that castle, like fortress. You can see this semi-round wall here. And so this building was one of the fortresses of Stalingrad, I would say. So for that building took place very fierce fightings. So Russian soldiers defended this building very well, but later it was retaken by Germans. So we earlier watched the show during our show the Pavlov's house, and this is one of the famous fortresses which is memorial today, but we still have a lot of such remains of in other fortresses like this Commissar house unfortunately in such bad condition. So now we're heading to the Pribaltiysk Street, where were positions of the 138 Rifle Division, and just let's say in 100 meters they were already German positions. We can already see the chimneys behind the trees of Barrikady Gun factory. So this is already German positions. So we can see how close the German positions were
Yeah.
to Russian positions.
Just for a second, just stay in one place for a second and let your camera kind of focus a bit, because as you're moving, it's
okay.
the image is taking a bit while to focus. So just kind of hold that image there for a few seconds, and we can get it in sharper focus.
Okay.
There we are. That's better. It's coming in now. Just the limitations of as we're moving. The image is refreshing, but it's fantastic stuff to have live stuff in the battlefield. As we've already said here on World War II TV, we're doing this groundbreaking stuff where we're bringing you these battlefields live. I mean, it's no one else is doing this stuff. So thanks to Paul's expertise and Mikhail, it's amazing stuff here. So, I mean, and you've been there many times yourself, Paul, haven't you?
Yeah. It's a fantastic site, actually. I mean, obviously difficult for Mikhail today because of, beautiful sunny day, blue sky, but as we've said, it's -10. So yeah, we've got some real off-front conditions. But just to go on a little bit and sort of get us into where we are around where we've been around the Commissar's house. The large assault on the 16th, the Germans began to push into the northern side of the factory. Now, elements of the 308th Guards Division and the 84th Tank Brigade fought back ferociously. On that day, the Germans actually lost 17 panzers from Panzer Regiment 36 from the 14th Panzer Division. The Russians lost 16 tanks, but what the Russians had done, they mainly dug the tanks into the factory area, which is why they took such a toll of the actual German panzers. So the Germans were trying to blast their way in. 308 guards are just about hanging on. Mikhail, do you want to just describe what? Now we're at the memorial. I'll give you a chance to describe.
Of course,
the
yes.
memorial is.
Yeah, this is the memorial plaque, which was established here in 1952, just 1 year. Joseph Stalin passed away, which is saying here in December 1942, when the front line of defense for Red Banner 138 Rifle Division. The division under the commandments of Colonel Lyudnikov heroically defended this territory, which was later named as Islands of Lyudnikov, or we know it is as Islands of Fire. The division was able to reject or repel all of the enemy attacks, and then to take part in the German fascists in the defeat of German fascist forces under Stalingrad. Here we can see the word Stalingrad written in Russian, the medal for defense of Stalingrad, some weapons, shields for our Soviet motherland. So, but in front of us, just look, these two-story buildings, which still keep the bullet traces and scars of war from those times. This was the front line of Stalingrad front. Yeah, and just behind them we can see the chimneys and the shops of Barrikady Gun factory. So I have just one story to tell our people. A few years ago, exactly in 2014, I met here an old man who was in his 80s, and I met him with some tourists I brought here to show these places, and we noticed he brought some flowers and wreaths to the mass grave of Soviet soldiers, and we asked him why he was here in February 2014. And he told that he was here when he was 14-year-old boy. He lived a couple kilometers that direction, and during the German attack, his mother was wounded by the German artillery fire, and she was dying, and told him to run to the Volga River, which was, she told him that it is the only one place where he could survive. So he ran, and to the bank of the Volga River. He found there quite a lot of civilians hiding in the foxholes in the sandy bank of Volga, and he made the same foxhole for him. And later, that night, he saw how the division of Lyudnikov was crossing the Volga River and arriving here. That was the end of October 1942. Yeah, the same day, Germans captured Barrikady Gun factory, and they stopped to moving east to the Volga. So that night, the division of Lyudnikov had time to cross the Volga River and to land in this area. So where we are standing, this is this street. So right here, he said, were the trenches of where Russian soldiers built the positions. Yeah, so he with another civilians left here for 2 weeks during the fightings. So between the fightings, he was with another civilians bringing the supplies, ammunition, food to soldiers. So he saw here very terrible things. One of the terrible things he described, one attack from that direction. He had to stay during one of the attack with soldiers, Soviet soldiers. He saw the Germans were using the
have we lost Mikhail there for a second or two?
Yeah, looks like it.
Well, if you jump in, Paul, and carry on
Yeah,
about
sure,
when we get Mikhail back in again.
Just to sort of flesh out a little bit about what Mikhail. I mean, great story. That I mean, those are the stories that you. Oh, he's back again.
Okay.
Yeah. So the initial German assault was held, although they pushed down to the actual the Prospect Lenin, which Mikhail knows, where the main road through the factory area. Like Mikhail said, what the initial ferocious defence of the factory did was it again bought time for Shuvarikov, but very similar to getting the 30 Guard rifle over in the city centre. It bought him time to get Lyudnikov's 138th Rifle Division over into the factory on the 17th of October. And like Mikhail's pointed out brilliantly, we're actually into the front line area now, where they actually took up their defences. It has to be said, I mean, we looked at Pavlov's house last time, and the sort of the almost mythical status that Pavlov's house has got in the defence of the city centre. Now, to a certain extent, that has been, I wouldn't say exaggerated by the Soviet propaganda, but as I mentioned, the city centre actually became a relatively quiet zone. If there was no quiet zones, obviously, in Stalingrad, but compared to the fighting here, for me, this place, Lyudnikov's Island, and the defence by the forces here in the Barrikady is really the great example of the Russian sacrifice and what the Russians were actually willing to do, the individual soldier, to actually hold the banks of the Volga and hold the city, and it obviously became known as the island of fire, the island of Lyudnikov.
And slightly, a fewer civilians in the area, weren't there? Because it was industrial area, they weren't living there where they were, and so both sides could be a bit more, aggressive with flamethrowers and with
it was a very dangerous place. I mean, what had happened was, because the Germans had cleared out all the workers' settlements to the west, obviously a lot of the civilians had made their way into the factory areas towards the Volga, thinking that was their only route of escape. And yes, as we moved into the factories, we are talking about brutal close quarter combat from both sides. We're talking about, obviously, apart from artillery, mortars, tanks, assault guns, we're also talking about engineers with satchel charges, flamethrowers. In fact, what's happened on the 1st of November, there was a conference between Paulus and General Wolfram von Richthofen at the 8th Air Corps headquarters with General Phoebe, the commander of the 8th Air Corps, and von Richthofen was extremely critical about the actual the progress that the Sixth Army were making into Stalingrad, especially not taking advantage of the use of his air power of the 4th Air Fleet. So what he suggested was that he would actually give some of his train space, bringing in ammunition and spare parts for the Luftwaffe units, to the Sixth Army to bring in more ammunition, because the Sixth Army was expending up to 500 tons a day of ammunition, and was basically running short of certain mortar rounds, some of the artillery rounds, the heavier artillery rounds. But what came around as a result of those conferences on the 1st of November was that Paulus wanted extra manpower, and he basically couldn't get it from the resources that were available in the Sixth Army or in Army Group B. So von Richthofen circumvented the command system, got in touch with Hans Jesenek, who was the Luftwaffe Chief of Staff at Hitler's headquarters, and basically used him to get a direct access to Hitler. Now, what happened as a result of that, there was 5 combat engineer battalions from 5 of the infantry divisions on out in the Great Don End and as part of the actual army group, were allocated to Stalingrad. And they were brought in during the early November period. Now, these guys, combat engineers, were specialists in use of explosives, demolition, close quarter combat, flamethrowers. So they were going to be used in the final push to break Lyudnikov's hold on the Barrikady. They were brought in, like I say, and the actual large offensive began on the 13th of November, where the actual combat engineer battalions, together with the infantry and the panzers that still remained, carried out a huge offensive into this area, and basically they cut Lyudnikov's division off. They reached the oil reservoirs at the south and cut the division off from the rest of the 62nd Army and pinned them into a very small area, literally just a couple of 100 meters from the area of the Commissar's house and the chemist's house to the actual Volga itself.
Yeah, you can see here how small the perimeter gets, doesn't it? I mean, it's one block, into use an American kind of terminology, isn't it? Really, I mean, everything's getting pretty bad. But
yeah, so the German attack had begun on the 11th, and by the 13th, the 11th of November, using these specialist combat engineer battalions that have been brought in to reinforce the infantry. By the 13th, they actually managed to late afternoon elements of the 305th Infantry Division and the Pioneer Battalion or Combat Engineer Battalion 50 had actually taken the Commissar's house. Now, that was a bulwark of the defence, so things were critical for Lyudnikov and his troops. The Germans were very, very close to capturing the actual Barrikady factory at this stage. But again, the Russian resistance and what the Russians were using huge Katyusha barrages from the eastern bank to break up the actual German assaults into the factory.
I mean, what I'm getting from this, some of us Westerners, I haven't been to Stalingrad, we get a sense of the battle there from the movies, where obviously they're filming on a set and it's maybe a few hundred yards wide. As Mikhail walks around there, I'm getting a sense of just the scale and the vast size of this factory complex. I mean, we know that it's a much bigger area than we think, and there's huge complex of buildings, and it's just amazing camera work from Mikhail there, picking up all those bullet holes and the damage there. I mean, it's who'd have thought at the beginning of lockdown that we'd be doing these kind of shows where we can bring you live battlefield bullet holes, amazing stuff. So where are you now, Mikhail? The tank turrets always point towards the German lines, don't they? I think Mikhail's got in and out. His signal's popping in and out as we go on. But we had a question, Paul, from someone saying there's no sewers in this area. The sewer battle was more in the city, but the city centre, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, it's what you had here, though, because of these great industrial jobs, it's a good point. Sort of the war of the rats, the Rattenkrieg, and the battle in the sewers, was more in the city centre. But just an interesting little aside, we were thinking of maybe trying to get into the Red October factory today, but that could be a future show, Paul. I don't know. when I first started going to Stalingrad, you used to be able to get access into the Red October. And it, as Mikhail has told us, it's a lot more restricted now. But when we just to answer that question, when we first went in there, the laboratory house was left as a museum, left exactly how it was. The ground was still littered with cartridge cases and bits of shells and fuses and all sorts of stuff. At the time, a lot of the factory was still derelict. I mean, I'm going back 20 years here. So they allowed us access to go into the rolling shops under the actual factory itself. And I've got to say that was probably one of the spookiest, most eerie experiences I've ever had, because it was a very strange atmosphere down there. The factory was attacked by the German 79th Infantry Division after the attack on the Barrikady had started. That was a really, really eerie experience, and it gave you some sort of idea of what this underground fighting was actually like. Unfortunately, the access into the Red October is a lot more restricted now.
Yeah. So what monument was that, Mikhail? What were you looking at there?
We are at this is the monument to the soldiers and officers of 138th Rifle Division fallen in the fightings for Stalingrad in 1942-43. This is one of several mass graves here. So we can see this mass grave, another mass grave of the defenders. When the Battle of Stalingrad finished, the troops of Lyudnikov had to cross the Volga River, and on the other bank they decided to return back, and few days later they returned back and established one of the first memorial to the fallen comrades here. So here we can see some of those names of those who died fighting here at this area, from the Russian side, of course. So here we can see dozens of the names, and of course there are lots of unknown soldiers buried at the same place. So here in the distance we can see the tank turret, which shows the front line and which points to German positions. So those buildings changed from hands to hands very often, and that was the so-called no one's land. Sometimes they were in German or in Russian hands. We can see the chimneys of the Barrikady factory over the roofs of these buildings. These are the modern shops of the factory. And at the same place we can see the command post of these ruins were left as a reminder of the those fierce fightings, and you can see that's almost nothing left from them. The area here was and the surface of these islands of fire reminded after the war the surface of the moon. So there here were dropped thousands of the bombs and shells. Here Germans used all kinds of methods to retake Soviet positions and to push them to the Volga River. They dropped the phosphor bombs. They have been shelling from the heavy artillery, from the Nebelwerfer rocket launchers. The Islands of Fire area was during the battle. Germans lost more troops and tanks per 1 square meter than anywhere on the Eastern Front. And
your audio is
same
cutting out
time when the fightings began here.
Okay, we're back now.
Yeah, 11th of November. And can you hear me?
Yeah, you're cutting in and out a little bit, but it's okay. We'll manage with it. We're impressed to have live images from the battle. So but you're cutting out a little bit. But
Okay.
so Paul, what are we? I'll ask you, Paul, while Mikhail's signal gets a bit better. What are we looking at now, Paul?
Yeah, well, these are the ruins of. This is the area where Lyudnikov had his command post and also an observation post. So these are the ruins that have actually been left. You can see a good photo of them there. Of the building that was actually used as what was basically the centre point of the actual defence of the area. And as Mikhail was saying, the offensive started on the 11th. By the 13th of November, they pushed into that area, literally where Mikhail just was, showing us where the front line was. And as you can see, it's literally took him a couple of minutes to walk from where the front line was to where Lyudnikov's command post and OPs were. Just beyond the building, you can see the fencing behind. That's actually the training ground of, or it used to be. I don't know whether they use it anymore now. Volgograd, even the local football team, and just beyond that is the Volga River. So literally, we're talking about the Lyudnikov's division had been pushed back into an area of a couple of hundred meters from the actual riverbank itself.
And what just for those watching, how big is a Russian division compared to American or British in World War II?
Yeah, I mean, Russian divisions, just a sort of, an American, say a German infantry division usually would be, just to compare the two in this battle, with about 12,000 men. Russian divisions, depending on strength, could be anywhere from 6,000 men up to 10,000. So slightly less manpower, and obviously it depends how a lot of the divisions that were coming into Stalingrad had actually been fighting elsewhere during 1942 and had been reconstituted. Them, some of them up to full strength. 13th Guards was 10,000 men, but a lot of the divisions that were getting pushed in were well under their full actual complement of men. But generally, the Russian division would be smaller in manpower and resources than, say, a German infantry division. But the actual, what was interesting here, that there's a lot of comments from the Germans who forced they were this close to the goal, and a lot of them thought, well, once these factories were taken, that was it. The war would be over. They could obviously get some rest. They'd actually survived the Battle of Stalingrad. But in reality, these couple of hundred meters might as well have been thousands of meters, because the Germans were completely exhausted. The Russians had literally fought them to a standstill. The troops in the front line were absolutely exhausted. Companies were down to a company size, normally German company, similar to a British company, 100, anywhere from sort of 120 up to 200 men, depending on the actual unit and its role. They were literally down to 10, 15 completely exhausted men. Companies were being run by NCOs, battalions were being run by lieutenants, etc., etc. The Germans were completely and utterly worn out. And of course, what has actually happened was Paulus has been stripping the reserves and the units out on the Don front and in the Great Don Bend, bringing in German units with you can see the actual the fence there and the training ground. So replacing with Romanian, Italian, Hungarian units.
Yeah.
So that now we're on the 13th of November. So of course, only a few days' time, and Operation Uranus is launched. And of course, most of the German units, particularly the Panzers, particularly their mobile reserves, all three Panzer units, two of the motorized units are all actually pinned into Stalingrad. So when the offensive comes, the Germans have no response.
So I'll just put that map up again there, because there's Commissar's house there. And just so people get an idea where we've been walking around this area here.
Yeah.
And we had a question. I mean, Mikhail's audio is coming in and out. We talked in the last shows and in this show about the Russian mass graves. Where are the German mass graves? That's the question we're getting today.
Yeah, well, all the Germans, Do you want to answer, Mikhail, or the
Yeah. I can explain.
Yeah. But basically, I mean, was it last year or the year before, Mikhail, they found 800?
We can you hear me?
We've not got your audio and we've not got your picture at the moment, Mikhail. It must be bad signal there. But well, I'll let Paul answer that one. When we'll get you back into somewhere where we can get your signal.
What the Germans did was,
so we don't have many German mass graves today. In the 90s, after the Soviet Union broke up, by the agreements with Russian and German governments, was all of the
Yeah, we're losing you, Mikhail. I'm just going to have. I will come back to you in a minute. I'll have Paul carry on the question. This is the perils, folks, of doing it live. So just carrying on on Mikhail's behalf there, Paul. So
yeah. What the Germans tended to do was their casualties would be taken out and they buried them in divisional cemeteries, Heldenfriedhof, like honor cemeteries, which of course, following the surrender on the 2nd of February, were all abandoned. So what's happened, and what's happened, as Mikhail was just pointing out, since the fall of the Soviet Union, the fall of communism, and obviously the German Volksbund has been allowed back into Russia, and working with the Russian war graves, they have established a large cemetery out on the steppe at Rashoshka. And at Rashoshka, there are, it's basically, there's no individual graves. It's a huge central circular cemetery with blocks to the missing. And there's over 100,000 names on the missing. And I think the last count is about 65,000 actually buried in the cemetery. So as they've rediscovered these cemeteries, or there was one found, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, that had over 800 Germans in. So that's how they do it. But there's no sort of mass graves dotted around the actual battlefield. The Germans have all been put into a big central reconciliation cemetery out at Rashoshka, which is out to the west of Stalingrad into the actual.
And then this is the thing we discussed in the last show, isn't it? The scale just gets huge out there. You Normandy and Italy and everything. It's dozens here, hundreds there. In Russia, it's thousands here, tens of thousands there, and it's just extraordinary how
I was actually in Stalingrad for the inauguration of the memorial, big granite memorial blocks for the missing in 2007. And when you see them, and like I say, there's over 100,000 names, and that's just the missing in action. The scale of the whole thing is just mind-bogglingly huge in many ways.
Well, we're back with Mikhail now. Your image is rotated again, Mikhail. I know you're doing incredibly good. It's -10 there. It's cold. We can hear your nose sniffing. So we're not going to grumble. There we are. You're doing incredible work, and you'll deserve a nice cup of hot cocoa later on. But yeah, amazing stuff. So you're back at the remains of the factory again.
Yeah, this is back at Lyudnikov's, what was known as the Red House, the Water House.
There we are.
So here we can read, this is the ruined house of the director of the factory barricades, in which was located the point division in 1942-43. I heard that you discussed the German mass graves. So German cemeteries, most of the German cemeteries were remains from German cemeteries were exhumed in 90s and collected in one place in Rashoshka, where buried today more than 65,000 German soldiers. Yeah, and at the same place you can see the names of more than 160,000 German missing soldiers in Stalingrad. So every year we still find.
Just a question that occurred.
Okay.
Do you start to get German tourists coming to the Russia now, or is it still people like Paul and his groups from England? Do Germans come?
Yes, of course. We get German groups collected by the Volksbund, Kriegsgräber Versorger, lots of individual tourists from Germany who come to see the sites of Stalingrad, to visit the places of the where their relatives fought, where they died. So they have the exact notifications from Wehrmacht. They have pictures from in the family archives, the pictures of the graves which were set by Wehrmacht, um, by the officers' reports. That yeah, and yes, we get German tourists as well.
Brilliant. That's good
Yeah,
to know.
I mean, just to put in a little from my experience, the first couple of visits I did sort of 20 years ago, and it was quite common then to have German veterans in the city.
Right.
And just to relay a little story, the first couple of visits, I was actually in the hotel. We were stopping in the hotel Inn Tourist. There wasn't a great deal of choice for hotels in those days. It was the Inn Tourist Volgograd. And I'm at breakfast, and there's a table near me speaking German, and there's a couple of old guys on it. And I thought, well, they've got to be veterans. So, you know, in for a penny, in for a pound, I sort of schoolboy German. So I dived in, and there was two veterans actually there from WWII, from the Luftwaffe fighter wing, Udet. And they'd been part of what was known as the Plaque Schutzstaffel at Pitomnik. And they were it was a protection squadron that protected the air fleet, the aircraft coming in during to supply the Kessel. And luckily for me, and it's funny how things happen, one of them, Fred Burning, spoke very good English. So I was introduced to them, and I actually managed to get them to come out with us for the next couple of days, during which time at Rashostka we actually bumped into a party of Germans from the 29th Motorized Infantry Division. And I became very friendly with two of them, Zeppert and Karl Schneider. And so it's funny how sometimes in life, you know, these opportunities develop. And obviously through that, I'd always been interested in Stalingrad, but my interest and knowledge and connections really grew because of that chance.
Absolutely,
meeting.
yeah.
But like I say, like 20 years ago, there was a lot of German veterans were regularly visiting Stalingrad.
Well, we've lost Mikhail again, but which is to be expected. It's we knew going into this, the cold on the phone, the batteries connection, and
well, it's going to be difficult in this weather.
It's you know, as I said, what we're doing is groundbreaking, and the Zoom meetings aren't really meant for live battlefield discussions. They're meant for know, bosses to talk to their employees about business quotas, but we're doing something different with it. But we'll get Mikhail back, I'm sure. But to kind of wind things up, because we're coming up for nearly 50 minutes now. So, how did the fighting in Island of Fire kind of conclude?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you've asked that, Paul, because it's quite interesting. Because it's, as I said, the Russians had been pushed back to this, basically what became known as the Island of Fire, this small bridgehead around the house that Mikhail's just been showing us. So the Germans were in the position they needed to be in, but they were completely exhausted. Paulus had actually committed his reserve into attacking the 79th Infantry Division, into attacking the Red October factory further south. So he basically had nobody else to force the issue. And of course, events were developing out to the south of Stalingrad and the Great Don Bend, which the Germans knew about. The Germans were fully aware that the Russians were massing for some sort of attack. But by now, as I said, Paulus had to try and force the issue in the city. He'd stripped a lot of the German combat units from the flanks. Panzers had got embroiled in the city, as had two of the Sturmgeschütz brigade. So basically, the fighting continued in the Barrikady, even after the Operation Uranus on the 19th, and obviously the Germans started looking westwards, not eastwards, as to what was happening behind them, especially the troops in the city. The fighting continued until the 22nd of November. And then they were issued with an order, basically, that until further notice, all attacks in the city were to cease. So the Germans then went over to the defensive, but that fighting, the brutal fighting, went on in the factory areas until the actual surrender on the 2nd of February. So neither side really pushing for an advantage. Basically, the 62nd Army was holding the front there, pinning the Germans in the city, while obviously events were out to the west.
Yeah, it's one of those examples of events elsewhere having more effect on the large scale than they actually are fighting there. Not that makes any difference to you if you're a Russian or German soldier still there.
There were still men fighting and dying every day. I mean, just the 6th of October, 6th of December, which it obviously is today, 78 years ago today, there was still fighting going on. Not major attacks, but literally fighting for certain buildings, fighting for rooms in buildings, trying to get some sort of ascendancy both sides, and men were still dying.
Yeah.
But although this wasn't a major part of the battle anymore, obviously what was going on to the west was now the major part. The Germans, of course, were now all looking towards Manstein for his counterattack that was going to start on the 12th, hoping that obviously Manstein was going to come and relieve them and get them out of the situation. But
well, that's one of those things, isn't it? That some battles have a kind of a moment of conclusion. I mean, even Normandy, the closing of the Falaise Gap, and sometimes other battles just kind of wind down and events elsewhere. I mean, that's Market Garden has a kind of a precise end. Doesn't it? Some of these battles, Hurtgen Forest kind of fizzles out. The Ardennes kind of gradually goes from being defensive to offensive, but there's no kind of one day it all happens. Well, I think we've got Mikhail back now, so I think we'll quit while we're ahead soon. We'll just let Mikhail explain where we are now, and then we'll kind of bring the show to. So where are we now, Mikhail? And we'll bring it. We'll just do another couple more minutes. So incredible work you've done and putting up with the phone dropping in and out. But where are we now?
Yeah, I'm back. This is a small memorial to Jan Petya Nikolai Petukhov of 8 division, who was just a boy, like 14 years old boy, who was sent by the boat to ask for supplies by the stream of Volga River lower. He was sent, so he survived the battle. And remember, I told you about that veteran, that old man I met a couple of years ago. Yeah, so that was exactly him. So he was here during the battle, and he was a participant, one of the boys who took part in the battle. So my phone is dying now because it's too cold. We are back to the Volga River. Yeah, Volga is just in, let's say, 100 not far from here. There is an electric hub, the water pump station. You can see on one of the maps shown by Paul. And this is the which is the engineers and so.
Well, we are really finally losing you now, Mikhail. So on behalf of everybody watching, thank you very much for doing that. I feel guilty sitting inside. I'm about half a meter away from a radiator. I'm nice and warm, but thank you very much, guys. We'll bring it to an end now. I mean, I can't believe
you're welcome. You're welcome.
That we will be able to do it at the beginning of this year. If I knew we'd be doing live streams from Volgograd, I mean, I would have never believed it. So in terms of those watching, please click subscribe, click the little bell to get the notifications. We're going to the second part of our World War II comics show on Tuesday. We've got Adam Lunny joining us from Australia, talking about Spitfire and Hurricane operations of the Australians in North Africa and Sicily coming up in Thursday, and then lots more shows coming up between now and Christmas. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mikhail.
No,
if you want to put the camera on yourself just to say goodbye, Mikhail. We'll bring the show to an end. But go and warm up, Mikhail. Have a nice cup of coffee or something. So thank you very much for watching, guys.
Thank you.
We'll see you all again soon. And don't forget, you've got links to the ledger tours that Paul operates. You've got links to Mikhail's company in the links below. A couple of people have already said they're going to book trips with Mikhail next year when things are travel is possible. And yeah, this is good, this show, but there's nothing like seeing these locations for yourself.
Welcome to Stalingrad, guys.
Welcome to Stalingrad. So come and see both these people on their tours. So thank you very much, gentlemen. I will see you all again soon. This is brilliant. So Paul Woodadge, World War II TV, ending the stream now. We'll all join again sometime in the warm. Thank you very much for watching, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Right, good. Well, we're done. Whew, that was a bit